This is the Dane Moore NBA podcast brought to you by Prize Picks, coming at you Wednesday afternoon. It's February 14th, and I know we still have one more game before the All-Star break, but I kind of want to take this episode to focus on this stretch leading into the break. The Wolves are 8-3 since that disaster loss against Charlotte. That was 3 weeks ago, and just kind of looking up some of the stuff over these last 2 weeks. Statistically, they're playing some of their best basketball of the season, sort of regathering some of those elements that slipped away a little bit when Christmas came and when the Wolves kind of hit their first lull of the season. It seems like they're regathering a lot of that. I have Britt Robson from Min Post here with me to get into these last 5-7 games, whatever we want to call it. Britt, how would you rank this stretch or compare it against any other similar sized stretch of the season? I guess in other words, how close is this to the Wolves playing their best basketball of the season?
I'm regarding it less in terms of better or worse than any other points of the season and more reassurance and rehabilitation.
That it exists, that they can kind of click that back in a little bit.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think I've said this on the pod before that I lost a lot of faith in the resilience, the core character of this team after the Charlotte loss. I thought was just terrible, and then they dropped a couple of others that were kind of classic. And to be honest with you, last night set itself up to be exactly. I mean, the template was there. Anybody who didn't think San Antonio when they were doing that, coming into that fourth quarter after the Blazers had turned the third quarter into their favor rather than what happened against the Bucks and the Clips. So this team was ripe for another collapse. I mean, they were playing in that kind of don't make a mistake fashion. And then, their sixth man or seventh man, whoever you want to rate stepped up, had like 3 or 4 trays. And before, the offense was pretty much ant and a prayer. And that really loosened. You could just tell everybody relaxed. Everybody began to move the ball again. Just getting that like 3 possession separation, right. In the fourth quarter, suddenly, it was extremely important in a micro way. In a macro way, I think what it shows is that this team has more fiber to it than a lot of the other teams we've seen. Obviously, the standard is still going to remain 03-04 because that team had success in the playoffs, the only one. But what I've decided, because I was calling this a trap game, like as soon as the Clips were done, I thought, I
saw that
they're gonna lose this game to Portland because Portland couldn't be worse the last time they played. They just got through wiping out 2 teams that are conference finalists in most people's books, and it just set up as that way, and it began to unfold that way. The fact that it didn't happen that way has made me realize, and I'm going to write about this for a column later this week, it's just time to appreciate what's going on. I mean, right now, I will tell you that they have not lost more than 2 games in a row, and we are 2/3 of the way through the season. So there really isn't a lot to bitch about. At the end of the day, if you haven't lost 3 in a row in 3 months, then I would say that your team is pretty resilient. And there's a lot of ghosts of collapses past as recently as last season. And there is a lot of youth that you wonder about, Cat Nance specifically, even though Cat, he plays young sometimes. And so there's just a lot of noise in the system that is in some ways logical to listen to. But what's the point? I mean, what is the point of nitpicking this stuff when it doesn't happen? And so I think what I got taught last night was that it is easy to over worry And it is counterproductive. If you really want to look at what's going on with this team, look at it fresh as much as you can every game. And what we're seeing is the old-fashioned fall 2023 Wolves in the third and fourth quarters against the Bucks and the Clippers, and then a grinded-out game, kind of similar to what they were doing in mid-December before Christmas when they had a slate of teams, or maybe it was like late November. Anyway, they played some teams that weren't very good, and they didn't look great in them, but they ground them out. So what I would say is, why not understand that this has been the best defense in the NBA pretty much from the jump and remains so,
right?
And that their offense is suddenly finding itself at precisely the right time. So
that's why there's not stuff to nitpick, right? Because those were the things that we were nitpicking, and over the course of the first 50 games or whatever, were worth nitpicking. It was the offense. It was turning it over significantly more than you turned.
It was the stupidity. It was literally that their court IQ in the half-court offense was just ridiculous. And so, you began to wonder if they're going to be this juvenile in terms of understanding the right way to play and not playing that way. What does that prospect look like down the road? And that's what's been rehabilitated and replenished in terms of my faith in them right now.
I was looked at Cleaning the Glass this morning, and they always have like kind of the running last 2 weeks, right? Where all the stats, but I looked at just offense, defense. It's always a good way to kind of capture the snapshot of what the team has been most recently. And over these last 7 games, which date back to the Dallas game, including the blowing the Orlando game in the fourth quarter and blowing the Chicago game in the fourth quarter, they are in those last 2 weeks, last 7 games, third in offense and first in defense. And again, the defense has been super consistent the whole season, as you said. But I just was curious. I was like, how have they even been like, what's been the best 2-week offensive stretch of the season other than this, just by the numbers? So I was going through it, and I just split it up into the first 7 games, second 7 games, whatever, down the line. And first 7 games, 16th on offense. Second 7, 11th. After that, 18th. After that, 19th. After that, 19th. After that, 15th. After that, 20th. And then these last 7 games, third. So there hasn't even been a blip.
There hasn't been a top 10 offense in the 2-week periods until now, and all of a sudden they're third against, Now, what's weird is that you think the Bucks are a good defensive team. They're not. But they have played against some decent defenses, and Dallas, for one, actually has a surprisingly good defense lately. And so anyway, but it really comes down not to who they're playing, but how they are playing. And we are finally, temporarily, who knows, but as of now, the dribble into 3 guys is being minimized, and that get off the ball has been maximized. I mean, 17 assists and 1 turnover against 2 quality teams is what Ant had. That does not happen unless he's making absolutely the right decisions and making them quickly and making crisp plays. And last night was a little bit different. On the other hand, he was hot and he got over 40 points. If you're getting over 40 points, I would still prefer the heavy assist to turnover ratio and getting everybody involved. But
that efficient 41, like he was 12 of 18 from 2, 4 of 8 from 3. It was like, that is the stat line that even if I do see a 6 turnovers there, you're like, okay, I'll still take it. Kyle pointed this out last night too. You said Ant 17-1 assist to turnover ratio last 2 games.
Yeah.
Kyle Anderson, I think, is 14-0 in the last 2 games. And when we oftentimes lump a lot of the turnover issues on Cat and Ant, Kyle Anderson has probably been the third most
Yes.
prolific there too.
At least
So
in terms of turnover percentage, you're right.
yeah. So I mean, that's what's behind the numbers. And offensively is that I was looking it up during the game because it was becoming pretty clear that it was going to be a game where the Blazers turned it over more than the Wolves did. And I was going through and like, how many games have the Wolves turned over their opponent more than they've turned it over? And it was 19. Last night would have been 20, which is just kind of crazy if you think about that. Right. This is the number one defensive team in the league and has been the whole year. And they're not a bad turnover team. It's just that
40% of the time, not even half the time. Right.
It's crazy. And that imbalance, or just getting it back to even, right? Mm-hmm. And just being an average turnover team, that has been the theory the whole time, is like, you do that, you become a top 10 offense, or in these 2 weeks, third. And for them to be doing that, plus the offensive rebounding has been up a little bit. And that's another one of those categories where you've looked at just broadly for the season, where you go, all right, why does the team starting and almost always playing two quote unquote centers, why are they losing the offensive rebound battle? It's, as of today, it's equal. They get just as many offensive rebounds, or they get offensive rebounds at the same frequency as they give up. And that's a product of, again, these last 2 weeks, balancing that back out. So there were always answers.
And there's another factor.
Oh, yeah, give it to me.
If you move the ball 2 or 3 passes in a half-court setting, it is impossible that one of those passes doesn't go to somebody behind the three-point line. I mean, it has to happen. When was the last time you saw a half-court set, or even just ball movement, and all the passes were inside the arc? That just doesn't happen.
No.
So what that means is that this team is getting looks at three and deciding whether or not they want to take that three. And what will often happen if they don't take that three is another pass to somebody behind the arc. It's a swing situation. And that is one of the main reasons, in addition to Cat shooting early in the clock on threes, which I heartily endorse, that they are getting more threes. They've always been a good three-point shooting team this year. They just haven't taken them. And so if you move the ball, almost by definition, you are going to take more threes, because you're going to have the ball land in the hands of somebody who's wide open behind the arc. And they're going to start making them because the shots are open. And when they start making them, they're going to start taking them more. Tell me Nah wasn't just ready to keep getting the ball after he hit a couple, I mean, and so the team was shooting very close to 40% from three, while their offense was near a bottom 10. It made no sense, except for the fact that you looked at all the times somebody was 16 feet away from the basket and turned the ball over trying to get 8 feet away from the basket.
Yeah.
That's that stupidity that just made this offense unlikable for 30, 40 games.
The nice part of it too, because Rudy's been, for kind of a month, he's been being like, we need to shoot more threes. We need to shoot more threes. And more people are kind of echoing that in their media too. The nice part is they are so low volume that or have been so low volume with 3-pointers, that you could dial it up pretty aggressively and it still wouldn't feel like that uncomfortable forcing of 3-point volume. Obviously we think about the Rockets from 8 years ago or whatever, even kind of Boston last season.
But
it was almost frustrating. This feels like they could turn it up and be at a comfortable level of not giving up stuff from 2-point range too.
And not only that, but the way Finch devises offense, it doesn't look like there's more threes than there actually are. 3 years ago, the Wolves led the NBA in 3-point attempts. Did it feel that way to you? It didn't feel that way to me.
Mm-hmm. No, I get you, because that's when they come,
because it's a ball movement thing. It isn't like, guys coming down. It isn't like some guys, driving into a wide open lane and suddenly shooting the ball to the corner. I mean, it can be a beautiful game with getting a lot of threes, as long as it's not all James Harden trying to, gull you into fouling at the 3-point line, or having 4 guys who are always never straying inside. I mean, Cat shoots a lot of threes, Ant shoots a lot of threes, Mike Conley shoots a lot of threes. None of them live on the arc.
No.
And that's the difference.
Yeah, they don't have any guy that's
3-point specialist.
I don't know.
Guys who have like
90%
of their shots.
Yeah.
90% of their shots are threes. They don't have any of those guys. And that's good.
It can be. I mean, you could make an argument. I certainly was around the trade deadline of like, maybe they could use one of those, because you were looking for like a medication to take care of this problem. That was just like, it needs to be more of that. So yeah, I think that is what's behind it. It's the turnovers. It's what we always knew it would be. Turnovers down, offensive rebounds up, shot selection improving, boom, better offense. As always, as they would say, can we sustain it? And that's the question here. I want to, because we haven't talked since the Clippers game, I want to get into that. But first, let's grab a break. Today's show is brought to you by Falling Knife Brewing Company. And Britt and I are doing a live show at Falling Knife on February 22nd. That is the day right before the post All-Star, or after the All-Star break ends. I guess the last day of the All-Star break. 6 p.m. at Falling Knife in Northeast Minneapolis. We'll kind of do a happy hour and then do a live show from 7 to 8 o'clock and hang out a little bit afterwards. Those are always really fun. We're starting to kind of try and schedule some more of these, particularly around the playoffs, maybe on off nights and stuff. This is, like you were just saying, Britt, like this is a unique year. There's something special about it, obviously. And it struck me last night when I was recording with Kyle, and he's just like, this is almost over. Like, like the season is weird, like not in like a bad way, but he's like, we're like well past, like we're 54 games in,
2/3 of the way, right?
This is not, and as you know, look at the Blazers last night, right? Like,
right.
Things can switch fast in the NBA, where you go from being a team at one stage and turn into another. The Wolves are here now. We talk about the contracts and everything coming. It is a good point by both of you to like embrace this and enjoy this, and a fun way, I think, for us to do that, or a good reminder for me, is to do that with other people who are kind of living this day to day as fans, watching the games, dedicating their time to go to Target Center, listen to the show, watch the game. So we're looking forward to doing that on February 22nd on Falling Knife Brewing Company.
The cliche is misery loves company, but you know what? Joy loves company too.
Yes.
I mean, when you're joyful, when you're seeing your team, go off, when you're seeing halftime end, and all of a sudden, and it took the fourth quarter, the other night, but closing games, when you see a team that, first of all, could get stops against all manner of personnel, if you want an ISO heavy team, if you want a bigs team, you want a smalls team, you want a Sacramento or New Orleans or whatever, two of the tougher matchups, they have beaten both of those teams. And so it is a time for joy and experience some joy with people who are being joyful about the same thing you are. Instead of like, you just broke up with your girlfriend, I want to talk with somebody else who's broken up with their girlfriend. That's misery loves company. That's fine. But joy is actually a better way to love company.
To go on that theme, the most fun games, right, this season are the ones you kind of eagerly look ahead to, are the ones against the teams who are also in contention. And obviously the Blazers last night weren't that, but with the Clippers and to a lesser extent the Bucks, because Lillard didn't play and they're just a little dysfunctional right now. Those are the games that you get excited to sort of stress test this Wolves team against. And I mean, there are arguments to be made about, the Wolves, and they haven't been resting players. They've been doing a lot of the things that can make you a 1 seed without totally being it. Does that make, Utah kind of did that for a long time, but I'm not saying that's what this team is.
Right.
Because they have gone and beat Oklahoma City 3 weeks ago in Oklahoma City. They beat the Clippers on Monday night. They beat the Bucks. They've
had 2 overtime games against the best team in basketball.
Yep, the Celtics, right?
They
Denver
beat the Celtics at home and lost to the Celtics on the road. Both of those games went to overtime. And they flew to Boston the day of the game when they lost in the overtime game. So, I mean, you pick an opponent and we can break it down. I mean, New Orleans, certainly the 2 games without Zion versus the 2 games with Zion, that is an opponent that would be a fearsome opponent. And Phoenix, the only time they played them, Phoenix blew them out. Of course, that was a rest disadvantage game, par excellence, I thought. But at the end of the day, you do have a team that has an identity. It's an identity that was stated a year and a half, 2 years ago, and looked awful to the point where I was ready to dump it. But that identity that was stated,
I think we got past ready. You know what I'm saying? Right. I just think back to Denver. Like I ask myself that sometimes of like, did I give up on this? Last year I did. I really did. In Denver, Denver did. And so to like that is just for me or for us is the proper context to be like this is they are really doing something that I didn't believe was possible for this team. We both said 48 wins, 5 seed in the West. And if I'm being totally honest, I sometimes kind of juice those projections by a win or two at the beginning of the season to like sound more. I did not think this team had what we're talking about, this ability to turn it up and maintain their identity, particularly against good teams. And credit to them, they have.
Right. And now that's probably a good segue into the Clips, right?
Yeah. Let's talk about that Clippers game. I mean, I guess that was only 48 hours ago. It feels like a lot with the travel,
Yeah.
But I mean, also to be transparent, I thought that was one of the teams when we've done
absolutely.
matchup.
I was talking to my friend Bob Hummel, who's a huge Clippers fan, and I said the Clippers are my pick to win it all. I mean, I said that 2 days ago. I still think that they are a remarkable team that will be better in the playoffs if everybody is healthy. And I think that they are still fearsome. I do think that the ease with which the Wolves have dispatched them most of the 2 games that they've played, it has really punctured my original assessment of that matchup. And I think the difference there, quite frankly, is that Ant and Gobert are ready for those games. And if they're both ready for those games, they put a little extra into it. I mean, the enmity that is occurring between Gobert and Westbrook, I think helps. I think that, it's always great when if 2 people dislike each other, you have the better player. Because it makes it so when there's a little bit of an edge, all right, give me the guy who's really, really good who has the edge. And I
rather
think
than the player who could just tunnel his team into a hole.
And as we keep saying, is 22. What we kind of forget is that when Westbrook, Harden, Paul George, and Kawhi were in their primes, he was in junior high. I mean, so of course he wants to go against these guys. Of course he wants to, I love it. It's an ISO game. I mean, Ant always likes challenges. To have guys you grew up watching on TV all together on the court, practically together against you and whoever else. I mean, that's Ant's, that's a wet dream for Ant.
With the Clippers, you're just talking to a couple people yesterday about that, because I was like, I don't know, man. They pretty well handled the Clippers twice now, and games that the Paul George, Harden, and Kawhi did play in. I mean, I guess the first game they didn't have Zubats,
right?
It's not like they've played the Clippers fractured in the way that they have the Pelicans or some other good teams around the league. And I don't know, just talking to some people yesterday, they're like, yeah, well, Ty Lue, he didn't show some things in this. He's going to have things that for the playoffs that he can take away from the Wolves, so that he can expose them there. And I mean,
as if Ty Lue has done that so far in their great playoff runs in the last 5 years.
He is a good playoff coach.
He is a fine playoff team.
And I'm not agreeing with this because
No,
I don't.
no.
I mean, and maybe it's like really
But that,
in some
that's
minutia.
pulling shit out of your ass, man. I mean, come on.
Well, that's what I'm. That's
Ty
my
Lue
question
is like, Ty Lue is basically storing his powder because, he knows he's going to be facing the Wolves in the Western Conference Finals and wants to save this stuff. Come on.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's what I kind of said is I'm like, okay, well, what are the palpable things here? And the one that, the main one we can talk about is just going small against them. Maybe they don't even start a center against the Wolves, and that's just in a playoff series. It's 7 games of, basically Kawhi at the 5 or whatever, and you try and puncture the Wolves that way. Though we've seen the Wolves a lot against teams that have gone small this season, and we saw it 2 years or last season, and it was an issue. There's been ample scenarios in which teams have tried to have that counter against,
and the Clippers have tried it,
and exactly, and it would have absolutely worked 1,000% in a playoff series against the Wolves last season. I believe that going small would have broke them. You can't firmly make that argument this season at all, particularly if you're watching the ways in which Cat and Rudy are guarding when they are asked to be more perimeter oriented or chase a small. And it's harder for Cat than it is for Rudy because Carl's more of an offensive player than he is a defensive player. Like, is that maybe the weak point in their defense going into a playoff series or going against small ball, going against the Clippers and Suns? Yes, it is. But we've consistently through 54 games seen this team be able to cover for that. And in particular, have Rudy Gobert never be exposed defensively. Gobert has never been exposed. There's not been, I mean, at least for an extended stretch of time, it hasn't been a problem to bring him out on switches. If anything, like, I know Rudy doesn't do it all that often, but sometimes I think Rudy is even like one-on-one isolation, top of the key against a guard. I might take him over Jaden McDaniels. I really might. And because I've seen 100 clips of it this season where when he's dialed in on it, maybe it's 50. He can defend in space too. So that's where my mind goes, is trying to draw the argument of what teams could do against this team. And
here's where my mind goes.
Yeah.
My mind goes to the fact it's a 48-minute game. So you're not playing your bigs. Sooner or later, you're going to play your bigs. You're going to play your bigs against Nas, Slow-Mo, and Nah.
Sure.
How's that going to work? I mean, tell me Nas just doesn't rub his hands together if he's got a classic big on him.
True.
Tell me Slow-Mo doesn't enjoy the fact that, he gets to guard. Slow-Mo told us that he likes to guard smaller guys. I will tell you, guys 6'9", 6'10", that don't really have a great clue as to what they're doing in the paint, that guys who are usually would be the kind that get subbed out on the Clips,
Yeah.
Slow-Mo can handle those guys. And then, it just, if you change your character to try to change the character of the Wolves, that's pretty much been Finch's project all year, to make sure that doesn't happen. And they are the number 1 seed in the Western Conference with the best defense in the Western Conference. And the Clippers, arguably, their crunch time lineup is very close to small ball now. Right. And so how's that working out? I mean, it isn't.
Yeah, no, I mean, and it's not to say it couldn't work in the playoffs. It might. They might, and they might beat the Wolves because of it. But it doesn't. There's nothing to me that signals that should be the assumption, right?
Well, and also, let's liken it to Denver and Minnesota. Sure. We always say that the Wolves match up really well with Denver because they can stick Cat on Jokic and have Rudy lurk on Gordon.
Yep.
And that's true. But would you say that they'd be favorites in a series against Denver? I myself would say no.
Right.
I mean, I've seen Jamal Murray in the playoffs before. And
Jokic.
Yeah, I mean, so, their bench is certainly a concern. But again, the Wolves could beat Denver a couple times. They have once. They've got 3 to go, most of them right down the crunch time of the season. But at the end of the day, just like it's theoretically true that the Clippers have personnel that would give the Wolves problems, the Wolves have personnel that would give Denver problems. It's not going to make Denver do anything different. It's just that can Denver, with what they have, not worry about that enough to lose? And that's where I feel about the Wolves and the Clippers right now. Now, if Paul George and Kawhi Leonard are hitting their shots, neither one of which happened in either one of their meetings, then of course it's a different game. But you can only go by what you have, you know.
It is proven to be a strength of this team, isolation defense. Playing, I mean, that's not just the Clippers. That's the Celtics games too. They are better against high-powered isolation teams than they are against, other teams that
they have a full handful of great on-ball defenders. Mm-hmm. They can't put all 5 on the court at the same time, but you have 5 guys who can really defend the hell out of the ball one-on-one. Ant, Jaden, Nah, Slow-Mo, Gobert. I'd almost throw Nas in there, I mean, there are a lot of great on-ball defenders on this team. And that's Mike Conley, Mike Conley's not chopped liver on ball.
True. That's why, you're not going to feel good about a Clippers or Suns matchup going into it, just given the star talent and the level you can assume that those players can rise to there. But just in style of play, that is an isolation team that you have the full handful of players that you can put against them. I don't know. I need to take more time to think about this and go through it. But I would almost say I think the Kings would be a bigger issue in their style of play. At least they don't have the star power, so I don't want to equate it totally. But when I think about exposing the Wolves in any sort of way defensively, it's making them chase, right? It's the off ball. It's using your speed off ball to be able to do it, because the Wolves can kind of square you up in isolation and guard your speed. Obviously, the fastest of players, they're going to burn them sometimes there too. But it's I want to see them play another team like that, right? That really is trying to spread you out with off-ball movement, pin down screens, having Cat navigate that sort of stuff. That actually is more concerning to me than playing at Clippers or Suns, because it's isolation there. The Pelicans are kind of weird because
they're the team I fear the most.
Yeah, but
the Wolves do not have everybody I just mentioned. Those 5 full handful of great on-ball defenders, none of them stop Zion.
What about the Bucks game though? Because the best Zion comparison matching up wise is Giannis. And they did a very good job against Giannis last week. And
it's very different though, because Zion very rarely takes the ball from the top of the key and goes down. A lot of the time,
less rarely than Giannis for sure. But I wouldn't say.
And also, I actually think that flat out, got to say the truth. Willie Green is a better coach than anybody the Bucks have had in the last 5 years that I've seen.
Seriously. No, that's the thing, is Giannis shouldn't have only had 17 points in that game, and some of that is just coaching.
But some of it also brilliant job. I mean, Mike Nori talked about the wall, the old Stan Van Gundy, build an effing wall, and it works against Giannis better than it does against Zion, because Zion, I feel like he is able to, his touch. I mean, Giannis still doesn't have finesse around the rim. What Zion has developed, at least in the last, I see the Pelicans on and off, but a lot of my impressions are the last 2 games that the Wolves have played where Zion has played. There's a lot of flick stuff. He's
got really good touch.
It is very difficult. And when he gets fouled, he's pretty impervious, as is Giannis. But Giannis just isn't as accurate in terms of being a finesse shooter. And I think that hurts.
think with New Orleans, why I mean, I've been talking about this. That's the weakness, right? That's their one-on-one matchup is a 4 that can really score.
And they got JV, they got Ingram. The Wolves are susceptible to great mid-range shooters.
Yeah. And so you can make the case there. I just that has been a team that I've caught a lot of on League Pass this season, in part just because they played the Wolves a bunch, and I've tried to watch games around there. They are really inconsistent.
Well, that's the thing. They get blown out all the time, and they blow people out all the time. It's a weird team that way. If they're not clicking, if they're, they're like, trying to crack a safe. If you don't get the exact combination right down there, the door doesn't open for them. But at the same time, when they have all the tumblers going, man, they are a really, really good team.
Well, and the other side of it is, what are the Wolves if not a consistent team? Right. We just went through it, consistent in some areas that they need to get better at. But again, for every single one of those 2-week periods this season, every 2-week period, they've been a top 10 defense. And until this most recent one, every 2-week period, they've been around 15th offensively. The Wolves are a consistent team. And to that end, when I start thinking about the somewhat lesser talented teams, the talent below the Denvers, the Clippers, and the Suns, it's going to be hard for me to pick a Kings or a Pelicans just because I think they're a tricky matchup, because they haven't been consistent teams, and they can't match the talent. The Wolves are going to go into that series as the more talented team there. So I don't know,
but they're also going to go into that series as a question mark. And they're going to go into that series if they drop one of the first 2 games, assuming they'd have home court advantage, there's a lot of poise questions that immediately come into play. And let's say, I'm just spitballing here, but let's say the Pelicans go down to their place and rout them, have one of those great games in game 3. Well, boom, they're down 2-1, and there's another game in New Orleans. And the Pelicans are hot and cold, but they've had 3 games of going right now. They've beaten them twice. You got guys like Zion and McCullough and Ingram and JV battling against Rudy. And you got guys like Herb Jones that can lock people up. It's Alvarado being a pest. I mean, he was great in that series against Chris Paul and Phoenix that time. I'm just saying that if the Wolves, one of the things that's going to happen, unless the Wolves sweep the first round, is they're going to have a mental check, a maturity check. They're going to be in a game they pretty much have to win to keep the series swinging in their favor.
Right.
And that's going to be, Finch was asked the other night if a game like the Clippers mimics the playoffs. And he said nothing mimics the playoffs. And that is exactly right. And so what we're going to find out is whether or not this team, if it is in a dogfight series, they're built for a dogfight. They've got a lot of talent. They've got great ability on both sides of the ball. They've played together well, but they've choked a half a dozen times this season. And remarkably, they have been resilient. But the recovery time in the playoffs and the stakes of the choking, both of those things, one condenses the recovery time and the choking stakes go up. So one goes down, one goes up. So that's a tough situation. And that's why I'm saying to people, deal with the playoffs when the playoffs come. Right now, this is fun, you know? And you don't have time to worry. It'll be, the playoffs are supposed to be, we just got through saying, if they're playing the great teams, that's the challenge. That's going to be a blast. The playoffs will be a blast one way or the other, and
it's about sustaining this right now through teams against the Blazers, and you're going to play other crappy or middling teams over the course of time. And it's like, and the final, what is it going to be, 27 games after the All-Star break?
Yep.
Can you avoid a fourth quarter collapse? Think about how much that would do to just not have, or maybe only have one of those, right? And just, it's whittling this down into playing to who you are. Not every single game. That's an unreasonable expectation, but increasing the frequency where you can be who you say you are, be who you can be, right? They clearly, we know it's 50 plus games. We know who this Wolves team can be. As always, it's about how consistent can they be doing that. Let me grab another ad break here, and let's do one more segment just kind of on recent developments over the past few weeks. All right, we are back with Britt Robson. Britt, 2 Monte Morris games. I mean, there's not a ton to dig into in his game from these two, and he just is sort of one of those guys that part of his allure is how he blends in effectively. Right. So I'm less. I mean, and I want to get some of your thoughts on what he's looked like, but what I like about it is it feels like this team now knows and has their playoff rotation. Mm-hmm. And we know who the starting 5 is, and Nickeil Alexander-Walker has a pretty clear role. Naz Reid has a clear role. Monte Morris has a clear role. And I think we were talking about Kyle Anderson a little bit earlier too, and Finch alluded to this after the game. It's big that the trade deadline is passed for Kyle Anderson.
Right.
And again, what's happened in the 2 games since the trade deadline, Kyle Anderson has looked a little bit more like the version of Kyle Anderson that Chris Finch fell in love with a year ago, and even that role seems pretty solid. So we kind of know what this group is. If they do add Marcus Morris or somebody in the buyout market, that player is going to be sort of in the Troy Brown Jr., Shake Milton role on the outside of the rotation looking in. How do you just feel about this group kind of coalescing into who it is that they are going to be when the playoffs come? Because it seems pretty clear that this is the 9.
Well, first, I give a lot of credit to Chris Finch, because this just came to me as you were talking about the 4 guys who are going to be coming off the bench. Who are the 4 players on this roster, practically, with the possible exception of Rudy, that he praises? I mean, his praise of his praise of Naz, his praise of Slow-Mo, and his praise of Monte Morris in the little time he's been here has been unstinting and like, don't mess with me. Don't give me negativity about this. That is not
he hasn't been having it with the Kyle Anderson questions.
No, never has.
We had to ask, and we're fair to ask.
Yeah.
It was fair to dig into.
I wrote a column on the whole idea saying he's got to wake up to the idea that offensively, Kyle isn't what he was. Yeah. And I still think that's true. But that doesn't mean I think he's a net disadvantaged guy. I just think you have to use him wisely with different personnel that complement him. I mean, you can't throw him out
shooters. How about some shooters around the guy who can't shoot? Exactly. Wasn't that crazy in the Clippers game? This jumped off the screen to me in the second quarter when Monte Morris checked in for the first time. That group was playing, just you could watch them. They were not looking for kickouts at all, and there happened to actually be shooters on the floor because they have gotten so used to playing in that second unit with just no shooting whatsoever. And Monte Morris is just like chilling there in the corner, like, I'm open, and Naz is like, no, what I do with this unit is I put my head down and I get to the rim because if I pass, everything doesn't work. It actually passing to the perimeter with that group, the Kyle Anderson groups, actually would kill the spacing of it, because Kyle would catch it in the corner and we'd dribble in, and it'd be now all of a sudden
absolutely so. He was a rhythm ruiner, and and a lot of that was because he's a very smart guy that calculated his odds of hitting one of those threes, and that was very low, and so he thought, I have better odds of collapsing the clock and trying to make something happen via a foul or an assist, and that's not efficient offense definition. And the net ratings, the offensive rating shows. I mean, they're 9 points worse. They're probably a lot better now because he's had a couple of really good games. He was plus 29 last night. Wow. And so, yes, the idea that you replace clanking Shake Milton, who didn't ever really look like he ever wanted to take a three, with Monte Morris, who's a career 39% 3-point shooter and a guy who can play make without being on the bounce. I mean, didn't look like Shake really knew how to dole in a proper assist unless he was bringing people to him, which in a ball movement offense is not ideal. So, and then Troy Brown Jr., I mean, I understood the infatuation with Troy Brown Jr., and he did have 2 really good weeks, kind of reminiscent of Austin Rivers. A guy who like, whoa, hey, this guy's really going to help. And he did for a while, but defensively, he just, for whatever reason, I mean, I'm not sophisticated enough in figuring out defensive schemes to know why he was such a black hole on defense, but he was for a lot of the time he was in there, the last half dozen games he played of any substantial minutes, which is why he got benched.
Yeah. I guess it's kind of beside the point now, but I think that group was just, it didn't make sense, and they could feel that they didn't make sense.
And how did Finch characterize it? He said, all 3 guys have things we need.
Yeah.
What he didn't say by that very thing, but what he obviously left out is none of those guys can give us everything we need.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
You know? And so we are going to pick the one thing they do well and surround them with people who do what they can't do.
Right.
And Monte Morris checks more than one box.
Right.
And so I think that's why it was a good trade. And it obviously gives Slow-Mo another guy who can shoot on the floor. I still think it is better. It's interesting to me that Finch wants to go back to that Rudy Slow-Mo combo that worked so well last year. And
yeah, that was tough in the second quarter.
Yeah, that was tough. And occasionally, I mean, he did make it work occasionally later on in his second rotation. But the other thing that's interesting to me is that what I noticed about Monte Morris is he's right now in the Rudy Gobert learning workshop. I mean, he had a couple of shots last night that I swear were lobs that he really thought, I think if I throw it up there, this is what he wants. And Rudy has not had enough reps. Rudy never assumes that a guy is going to throw him the ball unless he's played with him for like 10 games or is demanding the ball, in which case everybody immediately is around him and you don't want to throw it to him. Mm-hmm. But I think there's going to be some growing pains there that are possible. They could be good growing pains. Inevitably, you want Rudy to play about 6 or 7 more minutes than Mike Conley plays just for wear and tear. Mm-hmm. And so he's going to have to get some time out there with Rudy. And he's a good lobber. He's done it in Denver.
But I think it's important for people to realize that Monte Morris is not like a bucket. Like that's
exactly.
And that's what
But he knows that too. He's not.
He does. But it didn't seem like Finch did last night. Playing that group, and part of it, Carl picks up 3 fouls in the first quarter, so he can't play in the second quarter at all. It kind of I don't know if Finch was trying to get to that lineup or not, but when it was Gobert, Anderson, McDaniels, Nah, and Monte Morris, like that group is not going to have the offensive punch. And you hope that Morris can, I don't know, maybe be one of, if not your main offensive guy in that group. That's just not who he is. Just like that's still not really what like Jaden McDaniels is yet. You're not
putting 7 last night. Plus he has that, he had a bad finger apparently that, who knows what Jaden had something up with him last night. And, he remains a real sphinx to me. I mean, I have no idea what he's up to.
I don't know. I mean, I'm not too heated on his game yesterday against the Blazers, just because given what he did 24 hours before.
He's had a great 2 weeks, speaking of the last 2 weeks. He's not in foul trouble except for that. I can't remember which game it was where he got like 4 fouls in 6 minutes of the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
And
what a gift to have Nickeil Alexander-Walker to plug in and close the game with when Jaden clearly doesn't.
Nickeil, man. I mean,
give me some Nickeil.
Everybody right now is in love with Nickeil Alexander-Walker because he is one of those guys that every really good team has. And you pick a sport. You know, the guy who's like third tier on your team, a guy who you like as being a plucky guy that will give you something every now and then. And all of a sudden you're watching the games over a period of time, and this guy just keeps coming up with really important plays in a variety of ways, keeps finding himself in the situation, the need to make big plays, whether it's, like in baseball, a guy up with a guy on second and 2 out, he gets a hit to right or something.
Sure.
I mean, or whatever, backup wide receiver with 8 catches and 100 yards. These guys who are not integral to the absolute core of who you are, but can, if they put their oar in the water at the right time, make a huge difference. And that is Nah this year. And it's everybody who watches the Wolves on a long time basis. It's kind of funny. This is what Jaden was previous seasons. Anybody who watched the Wolves, there'd be a lot of people go, Jaden McDaniels. Well, now, like the casuals will say, wow, Jaden McDaniels, really great, because they've heard the reputation. They've seen enough of it now. But the people who would say, hey, Nickeil Alexander-Walker is really doing stuff for them, that's when I know people are watching the Wolves.
Well, I that's funny you say that, because when you started talking about it, what Nickeil reminds me of is, I mean, you and I have sat at hundreds of Wolves games next to each other, and particularly in more of the lean years, some of our conversation during those games would be about the 28 teams who weren't playing in the game that we were watching.
Right.
And one thing you and I have done is just kind of been like, hey, like, have you seen the Hornets recently? Like, I like this guy, Right. I think I remember years back, I was like, this Lou Dort, man. Like, I really like this.
Right. Yeah.
And to be clear, we've both, me and Britt, have thrown out plenty of guys who were like, oh,
that were
kind of like, and then they fall away.
And I gave you shit for Lauri Markkanen for like 3 years when he was bad. And then
that was like our first one. That was our first one. I kind of
Karis LeVert was the first one.
Yeah, see, that was whatever. But like, I've thought about this numerous times where I was like, if I wasn't covering the Wolves and just watching League Pass and stumbling upon the Wolves and watching 8 or 10 of their games over the course of the year, it was Nickeil Alexander-Walker is totally that guy that we'd be like, this dude, man, like, put him in a starting lineup on like what, it would totally be that. And what just an invaluable piece to have on the team. Me and Chris were, I think, in the Chicago game, sitting next to each other, and I'm like, Nickeil is the 6th man on this team. Like, I said that to him. I'm like, who would you say is the 6th man? And he was like, it's Nickeil, which is not really a slight on Nas, but right. I think if you ask a lot of people, smart people out there who watch a lot of the Wolves, but not every game, they go, oh no, Nas Reed is like a 6th starter that this team has. And in many ways he is, but Nickeil is the 6th man in the way I define 6th man, because I think consistency is so important in that role from that player. And that's what Nickeil's been nothing but nothing if not consistent this year.
I think also one of the main reasons is because Conley is so important to this team, and the fact that you're coming into the game and replacing somebody like that is crucial. What I will want to say, as somebody who was a Nas Reed skeptic, to put it mildly, for many years, is that Nas Reed's defense this year is not just good for Nas Reed's standard. Nas Reed's defense, especially, I mean, Finch shouted it out. I don't know when it was, either a couple of games ago or last game.
He did last night, too.
Oh, was it last night? Okay, that's what it was.
But I think he actually did it a couple games ago as well.
He is guarding perimeter players, and he has all season. I mean, when I threw out the idea that maybe Nas could, I threw it back to him. One of Finch's truisms: "You are what you guard." I said, "Well, Nas is guarding threes really well. Isn't Nas a 3?" And he just basically almost spat in my face. Come on. Why don't we just consider him a good power forward?
Right.
You dolt. Don't give me that shit.
But it is.
But he is. He can be a bona fide 3. I mean,
what was he bad at defensively previously, Brett? like first 3 years of his career.
Falling down. He was top heavy. And whenever anybody banged him, man, he was gone. He had no fiber.
Well, and just no fiber at the rim too. And he's still not a high level rebounder. He's still not like
getting better.
A stalwart at the no, getting better. But it's like that's who he was. You were like, okay, like pre-Gobert or whatever, Towns is off the floor, Nas comes in at center, the rim protection is going to get worse. Yeah, Nas could block some shots. He was like that type of rim protector, but he just was never good at being a defensive five.
He is not a great on-ball defender against heavy-duty guys. No. And that's still somewhat true. And as a result, his slim fast conditioning program,
he's fast
basically,
shit.
He is fast. Really, really good. And so that's why he stays with guys that, and what's also, it's deceptive, it's like so much of defense is being quick enough to be a threat without being on the ball, that guy.
Sure.
Rudy does it because they're all coming toward the rim. Nas does it because somebody next to him is in danger of being broken down off the dribble, and Nas can whip himself over and at least be a threat and have that guy have to change his equation on the fly. Nas does that a lot. And then when Nas does get switched out on the perimeter, you don't have to kick him out right away. He can invert, it can be a situation. He's frankly better at it than Cat, in terms of just being somebody who is
up for debate. Because Cat is actually better at the
rim stuff.
Yeah, the 4-man rim protection stuff, the rotation, be a body.
The classic 4, Cat is much better as a classic 4.
Yes.
Nas is better as a combo forward of all things. That sounds weird, I know, because he was a center for the first 4 years. But
I actually don't think it's weird. I think if he came in as a draft prospect, and his body type was like this, and you watched him play in college, and he looked like this, you would say that's a combo forward. Who's tall, who's 6'10" or whatever. But we came in and he weighed 50 pounds more than he does now when he came in, and he was slow and he was, posting up a lot. Like it is, I don't know. I don't think he ever plays center for this team, because even when Cat and Gobert are off the floor, I think Kyle Anderson is the 5 in those situations functionally. So yeah, we've talked about that before too, but Nas's defense and just being able to it's a big part of the reason why the defense hasn't dropped off a ton this year when Rudy has been off the floor is competence of all of those guys. Kyle Anderson, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, and Naz Reid. Kind of just ripping through some things quickly here, just random little bits. We did Nas. Me and Kyle talked about this a little bit last night. Did you do you see my tweet or anything about the weird deciding to have the offense in front of the Wolves bench thing?
I thought that was actually it wasn't weird. I thought it was first of all, I love Finch basically saying that on the broadcast. I know you were at the game. They went full force into it. They gave Finch's answer. Like, I'm just keeping Rudy happy, and anytime you keep Rudy happy, that's a good thing. But you got some really nice quotes out of Ant. I thought it was great. But it makes so much sense that Finch needs to be in their ear about the offense. He's got, when Ant, as usual, putting things in a way that makes him seem childlike and a savant at the same time, basically says, hey, we listen to Rudy on defense anyway. We don't have to listen to the coach on defense.
They're
absolutely right.
The direct quote is, because defensively we got fucking Rudy Gobert. We don't need them talking to us on defense. He's doing all the talking.
And that's absolutely true, And so where has this team been dumb? Where has this team been inefficient? Where has this team not lived up to its talent and potential? It's on offense.
Second half offense. Yep.
And where has Finch been most criticized? unfairly often at times, in my opinion, is that he's not imposing his will upon people to do things a certain way. Well, he does. It's just that he wants to give them options on what to do within that. You have reads. You don't want to be so stilted. You waste your talent. And these guys continue to make bad reads and continue to blow up plays by wanting to go ISO. And maybe it's because now the second half, which is when they collapsed a lot during the time they weren't there, they're now in front of the bench. And Micah or Finch or whoever, Pablo or whatever, can say, hey, we need to do this. And so, yeah, I thought that was a great little insight, to be honest with you.
Yeah, no, I did. I initially, because I was there for the the pregame when Finch kind of brushed it off when it was brought up. So I was like, okay, maybe this is just one of those things where a player is trying to do it for good juju and vibes or whatever. And I'm like, does that actually really matter? And then you're talking to some of the players after the game, like, and then thinking about it more of like, wait, what is the thing that the Wolves are worst at? Fourth quarter execution. Let's do something to make that be better. And I think, like we were talking about with the shot, in all seriousness, when we were talking about with the shot selection earlier, Rudy's been banging this drum for a month of like, we need to shoot more threes. And he has this was his idea too. This does not happen if Rudy Gobert has not been pleading with Finch to do it for a while. And it's just the most Rudy Gobert. Both of those things are just the most Rudy Gobert thing ever, where it's like, I can't help here. I can't help the team shoot more threes, and I can't help organize the fourth quarter offense because I am a 0 out of 10 at both of those things individually. So he goes, what can we do externally to make this be better? It's like, shoot the damn three, and let's just take more of those. I can't.
And have the coach tell people what to do.
Yes.
Because I'm so tired of them not doing what the coaches told them what to do in the huddle. Yeah. And what I think Finch, I think, has made his deal with himself, which is, we're going to ride or die with defense. I mean, as long as the offense isn't killing us, we are going to ride and die with defense. And I want to make sure that they know that and that we play defense when it matters. But I think he miscalculated because as Ant so, succinctly put it, they've got Rudy to tell them what to do on defense, and that part isn't going to go away.
That's true. Anything else from the last 2 weeks you can think of you want to touch on before we wrap it up or from that game?
No, I mean, not really. I think I am heartened by the idea that some unfocused question marks are coming into focus and are not seeming as onerous as I originally thought they were going to be. The winning a game that they were ready to spit up in Portland last night was yet another way in which I'm being reassured that this team is special, can be different. And I think that one of the interesting things that has happened is that both Rudy Gobert and Karl Anthony Towns are getting better.
I like that.
And that's, that's pretty remarkable, isn't it? I mean, they were really good in their own ways. Rudy far more than Cat. Cat has competition for being the third best player on this team. And he is playing really well right now. And Rudy is already like defensive player of the year, is suddenly, for whatever reason, even more of a factor. And having, as you point out,
he's kind of getting into the MVP conversation, and to be clear, like the fringes of the MVP conversation, where
he's never going to win it because he didn't even get nominated in the All-Star game. And I mean, let's face it, he's just culturally, and I'm not saying racially, because there are white guys that capture the imagination. I mean, Luka captures the imagination of people, but he's dorky, and that's just not culturally part of the NBA. NBA does not like dorks, and so the fact
I
that
think it's more, but it's the game. It's the offensive game that looks uncoordinated.
But also, I mean, and the free throws that barely graze the rim, and also the idea that he's from France and has got like this kind of stiff. He's the old Euro prototype that was turned into a bad cliche that has been erased to some point. But all of Rudy's strengths are not what are considered to be cool about NBA hoops.
No, for sure.
And so as a result, he's going to be underrated in that way. And, and as a result, what we're seeing now is that Rudy Gobert's on like a little quiet revenge tour here, sure. And more power to him, more,
as he should. No, it's and this is probably a bigger topic for another time to flesh it out more. But I think about this often of like how Rudy is this fascinating collision of the last 10 years of the NBA and the way in which efficiency has driven winning. And by hell or high water,
he makes the opposition less efficient.
And the way he does it, even if not aesthetically pleasing, is efficient in and of itself, as is James Harden, or what, is another kind of like emblem of that from this past decade. And it's just going to be a very interesting thing to look back on. And for both of them, actually, for Rudy Gobert and James Harden, that idea and that recognition for what they do bring to winning is never going to resonate until they do it in the playoffs. That's just a truth of this. And kind of for both of them right now, they're on their last hurrah to be able to do that and to be one of the best players on a championship team or a team that goes to the NBA finals. And Rudy's a little bit younger than Harden is. He kind of knows it's maybe these next 1, 2, 3 years that will define that. And he from a legacy standpoint does need that definition. But we talk about this a lot. My appreciation and how my perception of him has changed is just so immense in this 18 months. And the only thing I could really attribute that to on a broad basis is your appreciation for Rudy Gobert exponentially grows the more you watch him. And it's why, you talk to Utah people like they were almost like annoyingly into Rudy Gobert. Right. And now I'm kind of like, I get it, because you're also fighting this fight of his perception for him in some ways. And to what you said, he's on this little revenge tour of being like, no, this is actually real. I can drive a team to being an elite defensive team and a Western Conference playoff team, but I do need some help to be able to really be a contender. And the type of help he needs more than anything is perimeter defenders and high level offensive scorers. And he has a roster. I think he realizes, he's like, I got a roster that can do the things that I can't do, or give me the help that I need. And it's cool to see that come together for him. Because I think he is a good professional dude, consistent night to night. It's been fun to watch that. Should we wrap it there?
Sure. It's a good way to go.
Yeah, it is. Next up for us on the pod, Kyle and I are going to do a show after the game on Thursday after the Portland game again. That one will just kind of be a game recap and send us off into the break. Over the All-Star break, I'm going to try and, take those days off as much as possible. We might drop one in the middle of the week there, but after the episode with Kyle on Thursday night, that'll come out on Friday morning, there will be no episodes over the weekend or into the beginning of the week, and it could be just maybe there'll be one on Tuesday or Wednesday, but I think the next episode might be Britt and I at Falling Knife on February 22nd. So come to that. We'll have had a little break from the Wolves, and we'll get back to talking Wolves then. Yeah, until then, he's Britt Robson. Following him on Twitter at Britt Robson. He's going to have a column that does come out over All-Star break, and I know you're working on a little bit bigger of a story too that we'll talk about when that comes. But yep, you can follow everything Britt does on Twitter at Britt Robson and read him at minpost.com. Until after the game on Thursday with Kyle, he's Britt, I'm Dane. Peace out.
How I'm feeling, man, I hope it never stop, yeah. Green and hot so you can find me in the crowd, yeah, yeah. Don't let standards ever bring you down, yeah.